Listening into some of the discussions on the Jewish Democratic Initiative's Festival of Dangerous Ideas at the weekend, jointly hosted in Cape Town and in Johannesburg, but a lot of it available online, which I then popped into. And one of the speakers yesterday, also at the closing, is the former Speaker of the Israeli Knesset, Avraham Burg. He's gone from being one of the country's most powerful political figures to one of its most outspoken critics. Speaking at the Festival of Dangerous Ideas, he argued that Israel's future depends on confronting the very difficult moral questions about the war of Gaza, the ongoing Israeli occupations in parts of Palestine, and his intervention comes while there's close international scrutiny on Israel, how that intensifies, and as the question grows on whether Israeli politics is undergoing a fundamental shift. Avram, really appreciate your time. Just on your history, you were once at the heart of the Israeli establishment. What was the turning point that led you to become one of its most prominent critics now?
Good morning. To tell you the truth, I didn't change a millimeter of my political commitment since day one I set a foot on the political arena. Since I entered politics, I had in mind two main goals. The first is to put an end to the malignant occupation of Israel over the occupied territories and the denial of birthrights and democratic rights of millions of Palestinians. And I wanted a separation between church and state because it corrupts both religion and state. I didn't change my position by a millimeter. Israel is a changed country. Israel of today is a different country than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 40 years ago, and 75 years ago. So, on principle, I'm still standing on my same principles. Israel is a different country, and therefore it looks harsher.
Israeli opinion on the war in Gaza over the last while has also changed recently. I've been following the rhetoric of Israeli President Isaac Herzog. He's moved from rhetoric that appeared to place the responsibility on Gazans collectively to then moving to expressing compassion for innocent Palestinian civilians. Do you see this as a genuine moral shift, or maybe simply a changing of political messaging?
Gaza is a complicated story in the sense that there are so many details and so much information that we lose the bigger picture. And when you lose the bigger picture, it's sometimes easier to focus on this tree and that bush rather than seeing the forest. So let's define the current forest of Gaza. Whatever Israel did to the Palestinians since the beginning of the conflict a century ago, much before the establishment of the State of Israel, and there were many wrongs done by Israel, many mistakes done by both sides, but many wrongs done by Israel to the Palestinian. Whatever we did to them does not justify the first move of towards crimes against humanity and war crimes committed by Hamas terrorists in October 7th. And whatever Hamas terrorist atrocities were performed in October 7th does not justify the crimes of the crimes against humanity that Israel performs and exercises in Gaza, in Lebanon, and in Tehran ever since. These are two criminal sets that do not annihilate each other, do not balance each other, and do not justify each other. And we have to address them simultaneously but separately. Having said that, I will say that unfortunately, the president of Israel, my dear friend Isaac Herzog, at the time of the war was carried away by the whims and the bad spirits of the time and declared there are no innocent people in Gaza. And by this actually was part of the legitimization envelope that enabled Netanyahu's government and government of criminals to do in Gaza what they did. And therefore, if he has today some remorses about this or that, I'm happy because I'm happy of every person who wakes up from the nightmare and see a different light, but I cannot release him from his responsibility over this kind of public rhetoric.
Has the public's opinion changed? Because during the height on the war in Gaza, up to 80% of Israelis supported that war. Do you think public opinion has changed?
I'm afraid I'm not sure at what sense. We are going for elections by the end of October. So this fall, we are going to have an election. So this is not a public opinion poll. This is the real polling of what the people feels. And I hope, deeply hope, that the Israelis are going to replace, we as Israelis, going to replace this awful government by another one. But can I really tell you that whomever wants to replace Netanyahu really has a profound different attitude toward Gaza? I'm not at all sure. Now, it is not the security issue, it's the humanitarian one. Gaza is 40 kilometers from my doorstep. Gaza is 10 kilometers from our main cities. Do we really see the miseries of millions of people over there? Uh, um, Most of them innocent. No water, no proper health, no sewage system, no education, no housing. And do we really have a compassion for these people? The answer is no. We do not see the human dimension in Gaza. We see tunnels, cements, rockets, terrorists, enemies only. And this is the kind of blind eye that we turn our eyes to the humanitarian reality over there, and therefore we are responsible for it. None of the people running for the alternative government today really commits him or herself to say we're going to correct it. And therefore, yes, the public opinion, so help us God, will replace Netanyahu and his terrible government. Not at all sure the public opinion is so much dramatically different.
But it's more than just a war in Gaza. It's also about the increasing settlements and occupation in the West Bank. Is it more than just a possible change in government, but also what you've you've also argued is a rethink of this notion of the ethnic Zionism in Israel, and how fundamentally Israeli society needs to change.
I really appreciate the cautiousness in which you choose your words. I mean, in order not to use terminologies that might be too labeling or too complicated. There is no doubt that under the dark screen of Gaza, of Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the Iranians and the religious fundamentalism, elements in the government supported by the prime minister, his ministers, especially two of them, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, and a pack of members of Knesset, commits crimes in the West Bank which are to the level of something between transfer to genocide to ethnic cleansing. And we do not pay attention because our eyes are focused on the real practical dangerous rockets and drones and you name it. But what happens there is an ideological war. And I have a feeling that as for now, there are too few courageous people in Israel who say we must disengage from this malignant part of our land, and we have to accept a different operating system, which says that between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean, every individual and therefore every collective has the right for the same rights. Instead of having a government which has two regimes, one full of privileges for Jews and full of discrimination for the Palestinians, to have a reality in which we are all equal in front
Yeah.
of the political system. Now, with a kind of whimsical president at the White House and a very weak European foreign policy, I do not see how we refocus our attention on the atrocities committed by the settlers and the members of Knesset and ministers.
So let's be whimsical and let's be imaginative. Well, look, we do know that various accords, Oslo Accords, Camp David Agreement, the closest roadmap we've been to peace in the Middle East, but largely based on the premise of a two-state solution. You even moved away from a personal opinion at one stage on a two-state solution. You no longer support that. What about our imagination of a single unitary state of equal rights of Israelis and Palestinians, Jews and Christians and Muslims in that region? Why can't we stretch our imagination that far?
Lester, I'm troubled by how much you know about my positions, okay? I mean, I thought I will exile to the end of Africa so I can hide behind some anonymity, but okay, you did your homework and you're accurate. At the time, so that the two-state solution is the magic formula. I stop counting states. I count rights. I don't care how many states will be there. One state, two states, five states, federation, confederation. Give me something else. I will buy every political instrumental solution as long as the ground level is what I said earlier, and the foundation is equal rights for all. One person, one right, or many rights. Having said that, I will say that this is exactly the content of the Festival of Dangerous Ideas that we had here. At the sense that what is so dangerous that we want to be normal. Oi, Israel is the only place claiming to be the only democracy in the Middle East, and I will confess to half of it, the only half democracy in the Middle East. It's democratic for some Jews and not democratic for whomever is not part of the regime and whomever is not a Jew. But Israel claiming to be a democracy is find itself, or people like myself find ourselves in a very strange position. The basic premises of democracy that we are all equal in front of the law and in front of the system. So fighting for the normality of being equal is perceived in Israel as a non-normal. Wanting to be normal is a dangerous idea. So we convened here during the weekend, especially here, a nation that you know better, much better than I do, the kind of transformation which is frustrating and slow, and we will still have structural problems, and you name it. But when you look backwards 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and today you say, wow, did we really do this? Did we really move from separate colors to a kind of a potential rainbow?
Yeah.
And I would like to have in our region a rainbow society in which, yes, we do not fully agree with each other. We sometimes even collide, but we have mechanisms of conciliation and reconciliation that enable us to move forwards rather than to reenact the yesterday, day in and day out.
So, Avram, what's in that pathway in South Africa? You're right. We've had a pathway from apartheid to democracy, and you're right, a very imperfect transition brought about by internal and external pressure. What is the internal politics and the geopolitical pathway to reaching that vision?
I've no doubt that part of the future, one of the keys to one of the locks on the door is the international pressure. International pressure, both from Washington, which will maybe begin to happen after the midterm elections, and European to taking a different position, and global South as well. It is not just the leftovers of colonialism, of Holocaust, which are all handmade of the European or Western entities of the time. I mean, this story of the Palestinians and the Israelis and the Jews is also iconic and important and symbolic for the global South as well. So having a kind of a world coalition that will put a pressure to put an end to it is crucial. At the same time, it is very, very important that people like the courageous people here in South Africa, the Jews who convened together for better protecting democracy, with a dangerous idea that democracy is the system that can contain us all. And to promote this idea, to enhance democracy, to re-educate people, to remold the national psyche from fears to trust. It will take time, but I can promise you one thing. We are now into almost the 60th year since the occupation. It will take less than 60 years to correct the wrongs than it took us to produce them.
Avraham Burg, really appreciate your time. Former Speaker of the Israeli Knesset, speaking in Cape Town at the weekend at the Festival of Dangerous Ideas. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much.